On today's episode, I caught up with Nick Fulton from the University of North Carolina Rams Club, the fundraising arm that supports Carolina athletics. Nick and his team have ambitious goals to continue to grow membership and revenue while maintaining industry-leading retention rates. Nick shares some of the innovative tactics the Rams Club is employing to accelerate relationship building with their next wave of prospective major gift donors. Here we go, Tar Heels. Here we go. Welcome to today's episode of the Raise podcast. I am thrilled to be hosting a conversation with Nick Fulton with the UNC Rams Club. And Nick will tell you a little bit about exactly what the Rams Club is and how it fits at the University of North Carolina. Nick has one of the most unique, interesting job titles in the sector, which we are definitely going to dive into. Nick is the Director of Growth and Innovation at the UNC Rams Club. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks a lot for having me. Excited to be here.
We love starting these conversations to set a little bit of context and just ask you, who are you? Where are you from? When did you first hear the word advancement?
So I grew up in Minnesota and went to school at the University of Wisconsin, where I was a swimming student athlete. And about my third year in school there, I kind of made a determination that really I wanted to stay in sports and figure out a way that I could try and give back to make sure that people who are similar to myself and wanted to try and continue their sport in college would have an opportunity to do so. I didn't have any idea what that meant and certainly had not heard the word advancement at that point. So through some good mentorship, was able to get the advice to go to grad school. And came to grad school at the University of North Carolina, and was in preparation for the second year, gearing up for an internship, interviewed with a couple of different areas, and that was the first time that I really heard about the Rams Club. Still hadn't heard about advancement yet. Didn't know what that meant. Really thought it was going out to just ask for money as an intern. I had no idea what I was really getting myself into, but knew that I could see myself as giving back and see myself as the time that I spent working with the Rams Club would accomplish my goal of providing the opportunities to people like myself who wanted to continue with their collegiate sport career when they graduate from high school. So went with the internship with the Rams Club, and then about a year in, was offered a position in the annual fund. Still hadn't really heard about advancement yet at this point. Really what that meant was we were a membership organization. So we work with thousands of Carolina supporters, and they join the Rams Club and they get perks, and they as a part of their membership dues are all going towards supporting Carolina student athletes. Probably in my first year full time with the Rams Club, that's when I really started to understand what the whole annual fund process looked like, because I had an opportunity to work with some people across campus. And so it was really interesting that, all up until that point, really hadn't heard the word advancement, until I had really been in the job for a year. And then here I am 9 years later.
Had you heard it before this podcast started today?
I had heard it before this podcast started, yeah.
Somewhere in between now and then. So great setup. We will come back to the Rams Club and the specifics around your work there, your career path. But I do want to go back in time a little bit to just better double click on your student athlete experience, what that was like, what you really think back on. And my understanding is you were a member of, I believe it's called the Student Athlete Advisory Committee or Council, which is an organization that was really taking hold at Brown, my alma mater, when I was on the football team. I didn't personally have the opportunity to get involved, but I'd love to kind of get your take on that experience and maybe how that helped inspire you to continue staying at the intersection of sports and philanthropy.
Yeah, so that really is what changed my third year in college, and getting involved with the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, which abbreviates to SAAC or SAC, getting involved both on campus, but then also at the conference and the national level. It's really what opened my eyes up to how much bigger this whole enterprise was, and how many people it really impacted in a positive way. And so really it was the experiences that I had getting to interact with the administrators and getting to interact with the NCAA staff, and just to hear kind of the issues that were, at the forefront then, which crazily enough are pretty much the same issues that are at the forefront today. But hearing about all of those issues is really kind of what inspired me to go down this path and make sure that it motivated me to continue to give back and be a part of this industry.
Love it. And so setting the context for the Rams Club, first of all, I thought you were the UNC Tar Heels, so why do you have a Rams Club? But then second, just help our listeners understand the context that you are operating in, which is quite decentralized, obviously a huge source of brand affinity for North Carolina, which creates opportunities and complexity. And so if you could just give a little bit of the overview of the Rams Club, that'd be great.
Sure. So our mission at the Rams Club is supporting Carolina providing opportunities to Carolina student athletes. And so we work hand in hand with athletics, but we also work hand in hand with university development. So we are in the middle of over a $4 billion university campaign. And of that, the Rams Club has the third largest goal at $500 million. So we work really, really closely with university development, but we are completely decentralized. So we have a different donor database. We also need to work really closely with athletics and their ticketing database and all of the constituents within that are attending games that aren't necessarily Rams Club members. So we've got a unique setup compared to other annual funds that I think are at different campuses. But at the same time, we are doing a lot of the same things. So we are working with people who feel a strong connection to Carolina athletics, and talking with them about how they can make an impact, and talking about how they can give back and support Carolina student athletes. But so we have 15,000. We had 15,000 members 2 years ago, and really our main goal, or my main goal of my team, is to grow our membership to 22,000 by 2022, which is the end of the campaign.
22 by 22.
22 by 22.
Range of price points for memberships, if you will.
Yeah, so our memberships start at $25 if you're a student, $50 if you're a recent graduate, and then $100 is kind of our entry point for the general Carolina fan or supporter, and then all the way up to $25,000. And so with those different tiers, there are different benefits that are associated with those. And I think you can kind of associate those with the different types of societies that our campus has. So Leadership Annual Giving Society really works out to our $1,200 Big Ram membership level. So that's kind of a breaking point for us. And then, some of our top levels are really where we're able to, where we're really able to provide some pretty neat experiences and pretty neat access, but we're also working to try and, do more of that stuff for all of our members.
What I love about the athletics fundraising realm, and specifically what I've heard about your organization, is I feel like sometimes in a traditional annual fund where we're seeking generally unrestricted use funds, a lot of the society or giving price points, if you will, end up being potentially somewhat arbitrary, and oftentimes we try to frame impact based on a dollar amount, but the reality is there's not clear benefits to the donor other than whatever perceived impact there may be. And I think one of the nuances in your world is that you really have pricing and packaging and clear benefits that not only speak to the general philanthropic impact, but also offer great experiences. And I feel like that's something that traditional annual funds are aspiring to do, but it seems like it's a struggle. I'm curious when you think about the benefits and or challenges that prevents, because on the flip side, on one hand, you can create really neat experiences that traditional annual funds maybe can't, but on the other hand, you then have to fulfill those neat experiences, which traditional annual funds don't necessarily have to do. So I'd imagine kind of the stewardship and delivery piece is much more hands-on or high touch than you might find in a traditional annual fund. So curious to get your take on that. Am I kind of understanding it correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a team, we've got a member services team that has over 10 people on it. And so that's everything.
Which would be called stewardship maybe in another department.
Stewardship is a part of that team, but also events and hospitality and benefit. I mean, really it's ticketing and parking. And working with our donors on a daily basis there. And then also people who are on the phones every day answering incoming calls or incoming questions from either current members or prospective members. So yeah, that benefit fulfillment is a huge thing that we have to tackle and have to do it well in order to retain our members at a high rate.
And so, I mean, I don't know if you want to do a little bit of a role play here, but let's say that I'm wearing my Carolina blue today, so I feel like I'm ready to be a prospective member. When you think about that kind of price discovery, or how you or your colleagues can have a conversation with someone to understand, let's say between that $1,000 and $25,000 level, how far am I willing to stretch? You know, how excited am I about the different packages? Is it basically like a menu or on a Kickstarter campaign where you see, hey, at the $100 level you get this, and at the $1,000 level you get the backstage pass to the grand opening of the new restaurant that you're funding? How do you approach pricing and packaging in your pitch to donors, if you will?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that, because we literally had this same conversation in the office earlier this week around growing our membership. So as we're going out to talk to people who have never heard of the Rams Club but love Carolina athletics, or wearing their Carolina blue polo around in the airport, what is our elevator speech? But probably be quicker than that. Our elevator speech about why they should go check out ramsclub.com, or why they should learn more about the Rams Club. And where we really came out was there is absolutely something that we can say to that person that we know nothing about, which is, hey, you love Carolina athletics, be a part of the team that is supporting Carolina athletics. Help Carolina athletics win. That kind of bubbled to the surface as the not generic, but the unified message that we could say to anybody. But really, what was more interesting about that, and I think this is applicable outside of athletics, is, gosh, it would be a lot more powerful if we could actually know something more about that person, so that we could actually talk to them more specifically about, something that would be important to them. Do you have kids? Do you live within 50 miles? Like, is it realistic for you to come back to a game? Have you ever been to Chapel Hill? Do you know somebody who goes? All of these questions that we've got about people really shape the message and would shape my pitch to you of why you should join the Rams Club, why you should donate to the Rams Club. So that was really kind of the more interesting thing that came out of that discussion. Was we can give a pitch, but it's so much more powerful if it's personalized. And that's not a revolutionary statement, but it really kind of comes to the forefront when you try to do that role play and try to convince somebody to join.
All right. So I live in Boston. I love Carolina. I love football. I like basketball. I've never been to Chapel Hill. I've never been to a game, and I want to help you win. What are the packages that would be most well suited for somebody like me? Yeah.
So I would say, first of all, just joining the Rams Club is helping be a part of that team. So we've got membership levels that start at $100 and go up from there. But I would love for you to come down to Chapel Hill and come see a football game. Bring the whole family. We've got a lot of great family activities within Chapel Hill on the day of the game. And as a Rams Club member, you're going to get access to tickets before the general public does. But more importantly than that, you're also supporting all the student athletes on the field who are competing each and every week, whether you're in Chapel Hill or you're watching it on TV. And so you can feel that connection through the different information that you're going to start getting as a Rams Club member. And it is a great way to stay connected to Carolina, and hopefully a way to get you motivated to come down and visit Chapel Hill for a game or two. And hopefully maybe you can find one of those weekends where there's an overlap of football and basketball, and we'll get you and the family down for both. Are you in?
I'm going to check the calendar. That sounds pretty good. Very cool. So, look, I do think so when you think about that advantage that you have, where you have such strong affinity, a great brand, but also packages and member services that can fulfill those experiences if I did invest at a certain level and bring my family down. Contrast that to a typical annual fund where the gold circle is $500 and the president's circle is $5,000 and the chancellor's society is $50,000. Do you feel like there's an inherent advantage that you have, or do you think that the same donor services concept can be or is maybe being applied in annual funds that you're familiar with?
I think it is being applied at some annual funds that I've heard of. And I think that, and I also think that there are some absolute inherent advantages from an athletic standpoint. We're on TV. We are so fortunate at Carolina to have the presence that we do nationally, and we've got fans who never have come to Chapel Hill and never will come to Chapel Hill, but they will change their Wednesday nights because there's a basketball game on. And so that is an absolute inherent advantage. What's really interesting is that we are finding ourselves now as we get to a point where we're trying to grow our membership. If we just wanted to focus on ticket benefits as a way to grow our membership, we've got a ceiling. There are X number of seats in the basketball stadium, and there are X number of seats in the football stadium. And so where we're trying to probably have to think more, we're having to think more creatively, and probably, quite honestly, think more like a typical university annual fund to get all of those other folks who where tickets isn't the number one driver for them, and get them engaged. And so, I think the other thing I'd say is I think there's a way to think creatively about offering experiences, access, information. And I think that all of us who work on universities and are fortunate to be living in the place that people think is really cool and they have great memories about, we take a lot of things for granted. And so figuring out what it is for your campus or for your school or for your organization that is cool sometimes takes talking to other people outside of your staff. So probably one of the most rewarding things that we've done in the last 2 years or so is we had basically like a 2-month period where we were focusing on member discovery. And so we did a really robust survey, did a number of different focus groups and phone calls with members. I think it's a good check to make sure that, one, you're meeting the needs and expectations of the people that you're working with, but also making sure to involve people who you're not, non-donors, trying to figure out if you're trying to get new donors, you should probably talk to some people who aren't donors to figure out what they want. Why isn't Brent coming down from Boston? What is that barrier? Is it, you think you live too far? You think you had to go to school here? You think it costs $10,000? Whatever those barriers are going to come up in those conversations as you talk to people about it.
And I think it's interesting, and maybe a good segue, as you think about historically an organization like yours that perhaps could lean on that physical experience, the in-game experience as being a core pillar from a benefits perspective. But as digital platforms have matured over the last decade, you can be a Carolina fan anywhere in the world and be very connected to what's going on across multiple mediums. I mean, just on a personal level, I was in Iowa the weekend before last, and even the Brown football team on the Ivy League, which is not televised the way that you all are. I was watching on ESPN on Plus on my phone. I was in Vermont last weekend watching Brown play the University of Rhode Island on ESPN Plus on my phone. And even since I graduated, like that went from being impossible to possible with a pretty bad experience to like a really legit, awesome mobile viewing experience wherever I am. And in a certain sense, it almost reduces the need to even go to the in-game experience. And I know that you have an amazing fan experience and connectivity on that front, but I'd be curious to get your take when you think about the growth of digital. Your job title is Director of Growth and Innovation. There's no sort of faster growing category than digital. And obviously we've collaborated a lot on that front, but just this idea of being able to leverage the fan base globally, connect with them globally, understand who's engaging, start to triangulate that with your traditional donor database and or ticketing insights to be able to potentially identify segments of people who could be excellent members who historically might have been overlooked because so much of it was about being close to Chapel Hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, so I think one of the things that you mentioned is, or kind of you alluded to, is are we at risk of sporting attendance going down because of these great digital experiences that we've got? And I think that's real, and that goes back to what kind of knowing what is important to your fans, and so talking to them about what is it that would get you to a game, or why is it that you stopped attending games? Is it too expensive? Did the parking take too long? Did the concession lines take too long? All of that said, I think that at some point watching a game with no one in the stands is not as fun as watching a game with a ton of people in the stands. So there's going to be this weird. I kind of think that there's going to be this this time where we're going to need to figure out how to make sure everyone's going to need to figure out that they are doing everything they can to keep fans there, because ESPN is going to want them to do that. And, Fox Sports is going to want, everybody's going to want to make sure that there are fans in the stadium, because those are the games that people like to watch. And those are more fun games to watch. But I think that there are more benefits of the growth in the digital space than disadvantages, because you have so many more opportunities if you can do it right. And doing it right is really difficult, and we certainly have a long way to go. But if you can do it right, there's so many more different ways that you can engage with your fans and engage where they want to be engaged with. So, watching on ESPN, I don't have cable at home. So, the knowing that I watch exclusively on a mobile device that's then streamed to my TV, that's a totally different experience and offers totally different opportunities for engagement than the traditional over-the-air, watching on NBC or ABC. And it goes, so many more different layers than that, whether it's texting, whether it's email, whether it's using an app to engage with folks. But the advantages of the digital explosion are so far outweigh the disadvantages that I think it's a really exciting place for us to spend a lot of time in.
So as you think about those trends and you think about the 22,000 member goal by 2022, what are the metrics that you are focused on, and how has that evolved in recent years? What is your team thinking about? What are you really pushing people towards that add up to that 22,000 by 22?
Yeah. So, our main metric has been, for the last 3 years, total number of members. And so what the metrics that have followed, or the important metrics that have kind of built up to that, have ended up being retention, because the best way we can grow our membership is retain the members that we have. And probably the most interesting one that didn't start out as a metric, and we're still kind of refining it, is total number of prospects. Because really, ultimately, if we're trying to grow our membership amongst prospects, it makes sense when you think about it. If you're trying to grow your membership amongst prospects, you should have as big of a prospect pool as possible. So real quick story or example, we used to, this is 3 years ago, we would have a table on the concourse for every football and basketball game. And we would staff it, and we would talk to people about the Rams Club. And a lot of times it would be a great thing for us to interact with Rams Club members. And then we would probably get one or two people to sign up potentially. So not a great return on from a total membership growth standpoint. So what we did 2.5 years ago was we took a step back, looked at our overall goal, and tried to figure out, all right, how can we better use that opportunity? And so we've shifted our focus to let's acquire as many prospects as we can at that table. So now instead of asking people to join, where we can absolutely still have those conversations, we're asking them to enter their name in for a giveaway item. And so last year during football season, we got just shy of 2,000 new prospect names. During basketball season, we had another 1,500 prospect names. So there are a lot of, it's constantly being refined of how we can do that better, but that gives us a better metric of something where we took, or a better focus on something where previously we thought we were trying to grow membership with that table, but really that wasn't the right opportunity. I mean, that's probably not the right time to talk with somebody about joining the Rams Club, but it might be the right time to start a relationship with that person and start engaging that person. And so now what we're focusing on is how do we build out that prospective member journey so that when we have that information, we're giving them as good of an experience and we can learn as much information about them, find ways for them to raise their hand, and then talk to them about joining the Rams Club.
It would be kind of like if at a case conference, when you walked around to meet vendors, we all were basically giving you the pitch and then saying, do you want to buy right now?
Right,
might
exactly.
be a little aggressive to go for the close, bottom of funnel, if you will, activities. So really convert it instead into the equivalent of, would you be willing to share your business card, or would you be open to scheduling a follow-up discussion?
Yep, the exact same.
And so how would you define the prospect? You've got a let's just talk about maybe the giving funnel for UNC Rams, if you will. When you think about number of total constituents, number of qualified prospects, if you will, however you define that, and then number of members, what does that kind of look like today? And then I'd love to just get your quick take on the importance of retention, because I think you've really made that a first-class metric that without doing so, you have no chance realistically to achieve the kind of growth goals that you are pursuing. So let's just talk about total universe, prospect pool, members, and then the importance of retention in achieving a goal.
Yeah, I mean, so the universe is ever expanding, right? So, I mean, It is always when I'd never want to put a limit on this is our universe. People who went to Chapel Hill, that's not our universe. People who live in North Carolina, that's not our universe. People who like us on Facebook, that's not even our universe. And so I like thinking as big picture as possible when it comes to the universe. And then it's finding those opportunities.
Let's just be honest, like at least a 7-figure universe.
Totally. Yeah.
Maybe,
7-figure plus.
I don't know.
Yeah. 7-figure plus universe. And so where we need to focus our energy is on finding places where we can engage with that universe. So that is Facebook. That is people who come to games. That is people who live in North Carolina. But it's also people who are former student athletes. It's also people who are who just moved to North Carolina and are looking for a team. And so figuring out how we can engage. So I guess the second layer, or the second, one rung down on the funnel, is also continuing to grow. But that's a six-figure group as well, which is really daunting. So then you've got to
your total team size especially around the membership / annual fund is what?
Is 3.
Great. So, okay. I mean, when you think about that, like, there are advancement shops who have 1 million constituents who have 300 employees.
Sure.
You have 1 million constituents and 3 employees really focused on this specific goal. So it's got to be really important on one hand to focus on a broad universe, but at the same time, narrow that down as much as you can, because there's only so many hours in the day for 3 people to renew, upgrade, and acquire members.
Yeah, and this ties really nicely into your question about retention, in that there are only 3 people on the growth and innovation team, but our entire staff has the membership goal as one of our organizational goals that we need to achieve by the end of the campaign. So it is absolutely a shared goal across our entire staff, especially with our member services staff when it comes to retention. And so providing the benefit execution, the putting on great events, putting on, having great customer service when somebody calls in, finding new and innovative benefits is something that we work with them really closely on figuring out different things that we can offer. So it is a shared goal, but that is something that we absolutely need to get to the point where we know that somebody has raised their hands before we should spend any more time, resources, money, whatever it is, on then bringing them further down the funnel. So that might be deploying a Facebook ad. That might be putting a more in-depth email communication together. It might be sending a text message to them. But before we do that, we hopefully have learned something about them along the way that we can guide that can help shape our communication to them.
In a certain sense, you have too many prospects, and relative to team size, relative to hours in the day. And I want to just dive in to some of the things that you're doing to address that around a more strategic prospecting system. We've talked a lot about this. I think it's really a new approach for this sector. There are some great examples in the commercial sales and marketing world. I'd love you just to help our listeners understand, given that massive universe, given even as you narrow it to be folks who are engaged, it's still such a large universe that you have felt compelled to try to approach more aggressive, high volume, yet very personalized one-to-one qualification to ensure that frontline gift officers in particular are maximizing their efficiency and efficacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this ties into the membership goal as well, because the membership goal of growing membership without a revenue component, which was deliberate, only works if we're able to engage with those folks and communicate how they can make an impact at a higher level further on down the line. But the goal is to get them engaged and be able to have those conversations and be able to communicate that and display that. So what you're talking about with the prospecting side is, as they move up the chain, how do we identify those people as they are raising their hand higher and higher, and engage with them in a more kind of targeted or deliberate way. And so one of the people on our major gift staff and one of the people on our campaign staff have kind of implemented over the last 5 months is this detailed and well-established process for reaching out to people who meet a certain criteria and then find themselves in a prospect pool. So we had a group of people who are giving at a pretty high annual level, and they've done so for multiple years, and we have not had anybody assigned to that, so they weren't in anybody's portfolio. And so this seems like a great group of prospects for major gift officers.
Kind of this missing middle that we talk about.
Yeah.
They're frankly lobbing in pretty significant gifts, basically in response to direct marketing. Maybe there's some interaction with member services, maybe not. And if they're willing to support at that level without human engagement, what might they be able to do if they could better understand the next level philanthropic opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Chip Richards on our staff is the one who is really implementing this on a day-to-day basis. But essentially, it is starting with this group of people, and then he has created some guidelines of how am I going to reach out to these people and what am I going to talk with these prospects about when I have a chance to talk with them, so that I can determine their capacity, their inclination, and can figure out how we can best engage with them going forward. And so he has done that over the last 4 months or so. And we put a lot of...
He's doing that remotely. He's not doing that in a field-based traditional visit format, but rather pulling up the qualification that often is reserved for the first field visit into a more digital video phone interaction.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that first interaction happens over the phone or email, and some of them have moved on to visits because he does have a portfolio that he manages as well. But yeah, it has been a great way for us to both identify some prospects who are really great and we need to engage with on a more regular, on a higher level and on a more regular basis. But also, it has shown we've had some good conversations with folks where it just is pretty clear that they're not major giving prospects, and that's okay. We want to thank them for everything they've done to support the Rams Club and Carolina student athletes, but to know that they are somebody who really kind of falls out of the prospect pool is okay for us to is okay for our team, so that we can really work on the folks who are really excited about engaging, want to learn more, and want to find out how they can make an impact on the lives of our student athletes. So this whole detailed process, I think that the best thing that we did was we spent a pretty good amount of time putting together a really a detailed plan so that we could refer back to it. So we've met about monthly over the last 4 months, and we can check back to what our goals and objectives were, how each step of the process is working, because we didn't have this process in place beforehand. So I think and we think that it can be really valuable. So we want to make sure to vet it out pretty well before we continue to grow it within the organization. And the early results are really great. I mean, about 10% of the outreach has been to people. 10% of the people he has reached out to have been identified as people who we should have in a portfolio, and 6 figures worth of gifts from folks who weren't engaged on a really high level beforehand, before Chip was reaching out to him. So he's done a great job with kind of implementing the process, and we think it has a long way to grow within the organization.
Yeah, and I think it's your point about this is a qualification engine to support optimizing frontline portfolios and/or for Chip to run with on his own. But just as important, it is a disqualification engine. Not that we're going to stop caring about certain supporters, but we just have to be really focused on prioritizing our limited time to map against the absolute next best prospects. And so when you think about how many field visits that take weeks to set up, that take rescheduling just to get out there and find out this person is probably not a major gift prospect, by pulling up so much of that activity into a more inside sales-like approach, it's something that we're obviously excited about and happy to continue to learn more about. But I got to ask you, where'd you come up with this idea in the first place?
Hey, I was actually going to do this unprompted. I was going to say, to give credit where credit's due. Last year at the Ever-True Raise Conference.
What is the Ever-True Raise Conference?
It is a great opportunity to get together with thought leaders from throughout the industry and hear about some really cool things that people are doing on campuses across the country. But I think probably the coolest thing about Ever-True is a Raise Conference, and why continue to go back is because you get to hear from people who are doing this in the business world. And there are so many applications of what we all do on a daily basis that are happening in the business world, but take a little bit of energy to think about differently and think about within that business context. So that's really what I've loved about the EverTrue Raise Conference is hearing from those business leaders about what they're doing.
About 5 minutes ago, I saw a Slack come through that I think indicates that we actually just announced Raise 2020.
All right.
And I am going to get the exact dates to make sure that I don't misspeak. But yeah, we just announced Raise 2020 late July in Boston, and we will include a link in the show notes. And so, yeah, I mean, look, our idea with Raise was we can learn a lot from the for-profit software world. We can learn a lot from the for-profit marketing and sales world, and we can apply many of those themes, not everything, but many to this sector. And one of the roles that we've covered extensively is this idea of a business development rep that basically is a meeting setter for sales representatives. And I'm sure many of you who are listening have received that kind of outreach before. And I think unlike many sales and marketing organizations where they don't have to start any brand affinity or any connectivity with their prospect pool, every university has a huge head start, given that in many cases these people who are your prospects lived on your campus for 4 years, have been to games, are super connected to the brand. And so in a certain sense, it feels like there could be few better sectors than this one to be able to test this kind of high volume outbound outreach. But in the meantime, for-profit sales and marketing companies are doing it with no pre-existing brand. Colleges weren't doing it. Rams Club is testing it. There's immediate ROI emerging, and I'm really excited to see where it could go, from here. I guess my question for you is, because creating new job titles is tricky. Getting new FTEs added to org charts can be complicated. This is working really well. What does it mean for maybe not just the Rams Club org chart in 2020 or 2021 or 2022, but the sector more broadly? Are we missing an entire unit, division, part of the funnel, if you will, in the typical advancement org chart?
I mean, I think that will that may come out as more and more people start to test out and pilot some programs like this. And it doesn't have to be for major gift donors either. It can be for some leadership annual giving prospects, or it can be for first-time engagement prospects. And I think there's absolutely an opportunity to utilize students on campus. And I realize that this sounds a lot like the telethon or the telefund, but it is a different mentality and a different way of approaching it, where you're really trying to engage with somebody, and you're going back to your example, which I loved at the case conference, where you're not trying to close a gift. You're not trying to close a gift on the phone that day. You're really trying to reach out, learn about somebody, what's really important to somebody, and why they have been engaged, or what stopped them from being engaged, and really the start of a relationship with the person, as opposed to trying to close a specific gift that at that moment.
Well, and look, I think the reality is somebody like Chip can be member-centric, can be donor-centric. Yeah. Let's be honest, the traditional telefund is not donor-centric. It is focused on a transactional ask. It is the equivalent of trying to ask you to buy something at my booth at the case conference. I haven't, most of the time, earned the right to make that ask yet. And I think that Chip, and I think especially given the investment that you've made in member services, that's what I love about the Rams Club. You are trying to achieve really ambitious goals, but you're trying to do it through personalization and by earning it, as opposed to just hammering on a volume and personalized approach that I think increasingly is just not working. So very exciting to hear about this model. We'll definitely continue to check in with you and try to provide updates on our blog, because I think that there's tremendous applications of this across the giving pyramid to ensure that we're able to reach more people on a one-to-one, qualify people more quickly, route them to the best donor experience possible based on their capacity and interest, and equally important, disqualify people who are not the right candidates for our limited one-to-one follow-up. So good stuff there. I guess just on the RAISE conference and peer groups, you were recognized as an inaugural winner in the EverTrue 40 Under 40, which was a lot of fun, and it was very neat to have so many of you and your fellow honorees at the RAISE conference. What was it like getting to know that group? And when you think about peers in the sector who you really respect or who you've learned from, or mentors for that matter, who are some of the people that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, it was really, I was humbling, and it was an honor to be recognized as part of that. I thought it was really cool how y'all did that, and I think it was really neat to be able to connect to all of that group together at the conference and get to hear about the really cool things that people are doing and the different ways that people are thinking about this, our overall business problem, because everybody has different ways of thinking about it, but really ultimately we've got the same business problem of how do we engage, continue to keep, how do we engage with new people, and how do we continue to engage with the people that are already engaging with us. And so anyways, it was really, really neat to be a part of that. I think as far as mentors within development, I've started to, I'm fortunate to work with a lot of people on our staff who are really excited about trying to do new things. And so that has been a really great group to work with as we are trying to push the envelope a little bit. I love to hear about what other people in the athletics industry do. Other places in athletics are doing really well. Clemson does, I think, a really, really good job of engaging with folks. I think that, there are Ole Miss, I think, does a pretty good job of communication with their communication to members. I think that the University of Minnesota does a really good job with some creative experience and access pieces. So there are bits and pieces that are really, really cool throughout the country, and I think that is something we'll continue to find more and more of as you talked about, as we see more utilization of that digital space.
That's great. And so is there a informal or formal way that you're getting to know your peers at some of those institutions you mentioned, or are there, athletics fundraising conferences, for example, that people should be aware of if they're interested in potentially following your career path? Yeah,
there's the NACTA conference, which is, I think, in Vegas this summer. That is pretty well known, and there's a development track for that I would certainly recommend from a networking standpoint. I actually joined a couple of those organizations just to kind of see what they're doing, and just kind of see what that life cycle was like as a donor.
So that's been pretty. You're a mystery shopper for Minnesota, Ole Miss, Clemson. Is that fair?
I guess I'm not a mystery anymore, but yeah, I think that's been a really cool way to kind of see what other folks are doing, and get a real world experience from it. So that's been pretty neat. But yeah, I would say there are a ton of good conferences. I would certainly recommend going to EverTrue, to the RAISE conference. That's a great one. Even if you are not within the, even if you are wondering how it could be applicable, I promise that you'll find something that you can take away from one of the business leaders who's going to talk there, that you'll be able to bring back to your organization.
July 30th and 31st in Boston. All right, cool, Nick. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'd like to start to wrap it up, but when you think about the next few years, Director of Growth and Innovation, on one hand, balancing trying to learn more cutting edge practices, technologies, but apply it to a really traditional context and in a way that really concretely moves you forward around your goals. What do you think 5 years from now the advancement sector looks like? What are the big changes that you anticipate or that you're aspiring to be able to implement in pursuit of the 22 by 22 objective?
So I can tell you what it's going to mean for us, or what's already started to mean for us, is we have engaged with a marketing firm to get their advice on strategy development. And so that is going to shift our focus from doing a really good job of communicating to our membership. It's actually going to grow our focus to not just communicating really well to our membership, but also marketing to people who aren't members. Right now, if you are a member, you're getting a lot of communication from us, and it's really good. But if you are not a member, we're not talking to you. And so there's going to be, I think, a continued growth of marketing and an emphasis on marketing across multiple different channels. I think there's, a couple of great examples I heard at the RAISE conference were digital development officers, where they're really listening to what people are saying, but then they're also able to push out communication based on what they're based on what they're hearing, but also based on the messages they want people to get. So I think that's going to be a much bigger focus. And then I think it's, all right, great, we've got more people engaged. How do we talk with those people who are more engaged? So that's where it comes back to the those development officers that are potentially more internal and have in that internal sales mentality, where they're reaching out to a lot of people to gauge interest, to gauge engagement, to gauge capacity, to gauge inclination, and figure out where the match is within the organization, and continue to find better ways to illustrate the ways that they can make an impact and help us accomplish our goal.
Love it. Are you hiring? Should somebody who's listening check out the Rams Club jobs page right now? What's the current opening, if any, or what do you anticipate having openings emerge in the coming months?
So we don't have any openings right now, but I would certainly, I'm happy to talk with anybody who has any type of interest in the athletics development world, or would just like to hear more on it. We are we're very, very fortunate that we've got a really long tenured staff. And so, again, unfortunately there aren't any positions open, but they will be posted on ramsclub.com whenever they are. So feel free to check back.
Good stuff. Nick, it has been a pleasure getting to know you better. We love having the opportunity to brainstorm new ideas with you, but always in a way that hopefully can make a really clear impact today. And so thank you for that partnership. Look forward to seeing you at future RAISE conferences. And with that, we're going to sign off with Nick Fulton, the Director of Growth and Innovations at the UNC Rams Club. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Really appreciate the time.